It was just kind of a happenstance meeting. I don't know if it was during when Ron was out there meeting and greeting everybody and shaking hands. But the one and only Dylan Thunderheart is with us today on Skype. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm pretty good. How are you?
I can't complain, minus a little bit of the Georgia heat down here. But yeah, we wanted to have you on, man. We were very impressed with just your whole demeanor and a lot of what you have been doing for campus outreach, amongst just being a great human being. And I kind of needed this today, man. It's a story that I was going to share on another program, and we got to do a little bit of that part later on. But to have somebody that's as positive and as outgoing, who's trying to affect some really good change and good vibes out there, man, it's good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. That means a whole lot.
So we actually, Shane was right. We met when we were in line to take pictures with Ron Paul. And the thing that was funny about that is usually when you're in line for something, you're just trying to like edge forward, maybe like skip in line in front of somebody who's not paying attention.
Boy, Banks, this doesn't sound very nap of you.
I'm just saying that's what usual like lines are like. And in this line, which was really, really long, everybody was just patient, just waiting, happy to have conversations while waiting. And I was lucky enough to be like right behind or right next to Dylan, who I think started the conversation. He's a very happy, jovial people person.
Big guy too, man.
Yeah.
What are you, like 6'2", 6'3"?
Probably like 6'1.5", somewhere around that.
No, I just remember looking up to you. Man, this guy's tall.
And we started talking.
It was great to
Hey,
you go.
Sorry about that. We just started talking, and of course, everybody there has something in common. Sometimes multiple things, but at the very least, you have Ron Paul and liberty and being active. Not just that you like Ron Paul and liberty. You're trying to find ways to do something. And I found out about this, and I guess I've called him a kid before. I apologize for that because that really doesn't.
No, you good?
You're really you've got a handle on things and a plan for life that I find quite amazing. You're in college in Oklahoma, correct?
Yep, University of Tulsa, Rain Cane.
What's rank gain?
Oh, Rain Cane. It's because we're the Golden Hurricanes, so you say Rain Cane.
I have a feeling Shane knows that, and he's now laughing because
I don't. Actually, no, I've never.
So let's start kind of from the beginning. How did you're 18 or 19?
19.
How did you, a 19-year-old, when Ron Paul ran for the first time, you were 11. Even the second time, you were still pretty young.
Yeah.
How did you come to the liberty movement?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who have these stories where it's like, and all of a sudden I was a libertarian. For me, it wasn't really like that too much. It was a very gradual process. For the longest time, I was a pretty typical Bible Belt conservative who really didn't care too much about politics. Then as the 2016 presidential cycle started coming along, I was very interested in like philosophy and that sort of thing. And so a lot of people talking about philosophy, talking about religion, were also talking about politics with relation to it. And so I was like, all right, let's look at all these different candidates and let's look at what is my philosophy with regard to politics. Because years before, Dad and I had this fun project, like what if we were to completely restructure the government? What would it look like? So I was sort of playing that in my head as we were going through this cycle. I was looking at all these different opinions on Instagram. I found a bunch of like, which is not necessarily the best place to look, but I found all these people on, they call it Politogram, all these libertarian accounts, and they were bringing up great points, and they were able to articulate their viewpoints in ways that were really philosophically consistent and rigid. And it was like, finally, there's a political ideology out there with a lot of people who are very passionate about it, and that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, and it doesn't contradict itself. It stays true to a few basic pretty obvious guidelines. And so then over time, I became more and more libertarian. We had youth in government, which is with Oklahoma YMCA, where all these high schools can go into Oklahoma City and go into different places and do like mock legislatures and mock trials and that sort of thing. So before I knew who Justin Amash was, I was the Justin Amash of the crowd. I was the one standing up for fiscal responsibility and the right to keep and bear arms and the right of free speech and all Fourth Amendment rights, ending the war on drugs, before I knew who else was there doing that sort of thing. So I was very empowered by that experience. Then I took that into college and helped start the Young Americans for Liberty chapter. And I'm very, very glad to be part of this broader pro-liberty community.
And your grades have suffered ever since, I imagine.
Not really, my GPA is still over 3.5, so we're pretty good there.
Very cool. So that's kind of neat that what brought you to liberty was the consistency and rigidity. I don't hear a lot of talk about rigidity in political thought that often, but I like it. It's kind of like consistency. If you're going to have something that is a foundation, it'd be pretty like strong and rigid and so forth. So what were the first kind of ideas where you saw that consistency that brought you towards liberty? Because I imagine it maybe wasn't I don't know, something about roads or something that's kind of on the fringe, that it might have been something more mainstream.
Yeah, really, it was less about going individual debate by individual debate, and it was just the introduction of those first few fundamental concepts to what libertarianism was. That we wouldn't aggress against people unless they're aggressing against us or other people. That we're going to treat each other like individuals, and we're going to consistently hold on to the idea of individual liberty and free markets and a lot of these values that I already held, but I didn't know how to apply them consistently, and I didn't really know what it meant until all these different people who were also libertarians or libertarian-minded started articulating it in a way that brought me further into the liberty movement and made me realize that this is an ideology that really cares about philosophy. And being a philosophy nerd, I can't say philosophy nerd. It's not like I read all the all the textbooks in the world or anything, but I was very interested in things like Christian apologetics, and so I was always looking for what are the different premises that lead to this conclusion? Where are the self-contradictions? And the fact that there was an ideology that actually cared about that instead of talking points was brilliant.
So now that you're armed, or we're armed with all those tools, which are this framework that explains why the golden rule and the NAP are so important to a virtuous society. You grew up, I imagine, around the people who framed your first framework of being a Christian, Bible Belt, kind of so forth. How are your interactions with them, your parents and friends and peers who are maybe not libertarian yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Being a Christian libertarian, I see Christianity and the way Jesus carried out his life as the fundamental reason why I'm a libertarian. Because Jesus lived a very peaceful life and he treated other people as individuals, even though he had the authority, being part of the Godhead, even though he had the authority to ruin people and demolish people for committing the smallest of sins, he decided to come here and die for us and try to join into one-on-one relationships with us. He walked with prostitutes. He walked with tax collectors. He walked with, all these different sinners in the Bible and forgave them. And for some reason, our government, especially in Oklahoma, where we actually have the highest incarceration rate in the world, 10 times higher than that of Canada. So I look at our current state of politics and the fact that we claim to be the buckle of the Bible Belt, And I can't wrap my head around that. It's like, if you're really going to be committed to preaching the gospel and to preaching a book that represents second chances and forgiveness and grace and mercy, but you're going to put somebody in a cage anytime they do something that offends your sensibilities. Yeah, I find that hard to square with the way Jesus lived his life.
This is really refreshing to hear from a guy that, I mean, you're 20 years younger than I am. When you came in, and you started to understand and to see these things, I can't help but ask you, in terms of probably growing up in Oklahoma, where you've got a lot of, I would say, what we'll consider in mainstream politics, right-wing influence, very Bible Belt influence. What were the hardest things about adopting the liberty type principles for you? What was there anything in particular that was really difficult?
Is there anything in particular that was really difficult? I mean, part of it is just as I was learning it, no one really gave me the tools on how to spread that effectively from the get-go, at least. I was always a very talkative person, but not always the most, understand your audience and adapt to it as well as I would become later with a lot of training from Young Americans for Liberty. So I think that's a lot of it. I think the message of libertarianism is actually a message that a whole lot of people in Oklahoma are receptive to, and all across America are receptive to, but they don't. I think there are a lot of people who are libertarians who don't know it yet, because nobody's brought up the ideology. Nobody's brought up, hey, here's the set of values, and here's why you actually already agree with that. And that's the way you live your life. I mean, nobody lives their life walking by, say, a pot smoker on the street and says, let's find the nearest cage to throw them in. That's not how people act, generally speaking.
Well, I guess it depends on what kind of uniform you're wearing.
Ouch. But, yeah. So a lot of it, I mean, I think the biggest thing was with youth in government. Some of the things I would say would oftentimes get some weird looks from other people. Some of the things that I would do and say and that sort of thing, in accordance with libertarian values, would, in youth in government and in political conversations elsewhere, sometimes they would get some weird looks. And, to a certain extent, that was discouraging. But when you realize that you know what you believe and why you believe it, for me, it ended up just encouraging me to find more people who agreed with me on these values, because I was able to change some minds on some issues. And it told me, hey, this is a message that a lot of people can be receptive to. And if I get discouraged so early that I fail to bring this up to people who might care about these issues, then that's on me.
So you've now found all these ways to communicate the message of liberty more effectively. What are you doing now to spread liberty, and what are your plans in the future?
What I'm doing to spread liberty right now, I'm the president of Young Americans for Liberty at the University of Tulsa, and I'm also a recruitment director in Oklahoma. I've gotten involved with other organizations as well, like American Conservation Coalition, which is a free market environmentalist group, which I've always been sort of in that little pocket in between free markets and environmentalism, where I'm like, there are environmental issues, but we shouldn't solve them with more government. We can solve them with, private property or private ownership. Sorry, that's a tangent.
No, we love tangents.
We are famous for them.
We call them rabbit holes.
If we were famous.
Yeah, but I was got involved with that. Got involved with Students for Liberty, and a lot of it is just talking with people about these issues and bringing up the issue, asking people the very fundamental questions about certain things and asking people some obvious things that we all agree on, like, should we be selling weapons to terrorists? Well, no. That's something we can all agree on. That leads people in to really think about these issues. And is the federal government really all that trustworthy? Do you trust the government? Getting active and finding these people, because really a lot of people don't know about politics enough. A lot of these people, they really like. I'm going on so much of a tangent, and I completely lost that train
Quite
of
all
thought.
right.
Oh no, you're perfectly fine. I did want to push you towards telling us more about your future plans as well, though, because I got excited about them, and I'm hoping that I got so excited to meet you, and I just want people to get as excited as me.
Yeah. So my future plans, we're creating a bunch of chapters elsewhere in Oklahoma, and I'm planning on running for office. I would hope to run for office on a more local level, like Sand Springs City Council or maybe Tulsa County. Eventually, I do want to get up into state representative, and it would be an absolute utter dream of mine to run for the United States Senate. That would be.
And what year did you tell me?
2032.
Yeah, that was when I was so. I can vividly remember there. You laid this plan out, just so matter of factly. For a 19-year-old man, I was wondering where my next 6-pack of beer was coming from at that age. I had no ambitions whatsoever. I maybe had some ambitions of maybe running for some office, like POTUS or something like that someday, but it was really just kind of this pie in the sky nonsense. You, on the other hand, did and told me exactly what you've just said. These nice little incremental steps where you've already taken a whole bunch of them to get there, and then you hit me with, and in 2032 I'm thinking about kind of planning for running for the Senate seat. I was like, geez, Pete, who says that?
Here's the thing: if you're not aiming high, where are you going to get?
Hey, amen. Say it again for everybody in our audience.
Yeah, if you're not aiming high, where the heck do you plan on getting?
That's right, man. I that is a great attitude to have. I mean, self-valuation. What are you worth, and what are you worth to other people? I think the idea that a guy that discovered a lot of what I'll call the founding principles, the peace, the liberty, the free markets, the ideas, and has the ability to discuss them as well as you do at such an early age, and bring new light to even myself and Banks, because I had never heard of the principles of liberty described as rigid before, but I love I love that idea and what it spurs in the mind when you say it like that. They are rigid, and you don't need to flex, and you don't need to bend. I want to digress a little bit, because you've talked about a whole bunch of things, and one of the things that is near and dear to my heart is conservation. I come at it from an angle, but I want to know, for you, what brought you to get involved with a private conservation type group like that out there in Oklahoma?
You still with us, Dylan?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit.
Yeah. What caused you to get involved with a private conservation group? What spurred that on?
Yeah, so I wasn't always an environmentalist. I was always sort of the guy to be like, I don't know too much about these issues, and I frankly don't care about the issue too much. I wasn't thinking about it so much. And then just talking with some people, there was this person named Emma over in my high school who really, really started talking about a lot of this and got me interested. We went out with the Mr. Cooper class. We got on a bus. Everybody got on a bus and went to the Tulsa Performing Arts Center. And this guy, this person who takes pictures for National Geographic, talking about all these different species that are dying out and the rainforest that's getting chopped up, and how many medical miracles are probably hidden in that rainforest that's just being torn up to bits. And so then I looked up and I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't just horrible on that sense, but it's also horrible because it's a violation of property rights. There are all these indigenous tribes in that area that have a real stake to the area they're in, and they're getting their place just completely plowed down for profit by governments making special exceptions for certain companies. This isn't capitalism, that's cronyism. And it's really, really ridiculous to see what's going on. And then I looked up more about global warming, and especially my geology class. And then after my geology class, I got even more interested in that. And I took an environmental documentary class, as cringy as that sounds. But I ended up just really, really enjoying it. Again, I was sort of the Justin Amash, Ron Paul of the room, where I was, trying to figure out, are there ways we can solve these very real issues in ways that don't expand the size, scope, and power of the monopoly on force known as the federal government? Are there ways as well? Like, I was also worried about messaging. Like, these are really important issues that we're bringing up here about global warming, about pollution, about conservation, about deforestation, and energy poverty as well, and these different sort of things. And like, how are we going to bring these issues up to the right in a way that they'll be able to comprehend and actually like start to agree with? Because I was very concerned about that myself. Being a libertarian, the fact that I became very concerned about environmental issues was very surprising, because nobody is on the libertarian side almost. And so now I'm with American Conservation Coalition as a campus chair, and we're going to hopefully be hosting an event this semester, probably during Clean Energy Week, on ways that the free market can help bring about a future of cleaner energy, how we can use an all of the above energy plan, getting rid of subsidies, getting rid of regulatory imbalance, getting rid of these like, oh, this company will get this tax break and this company won't, and getting rid of all that and allowing solar, wind, these dirtier energies like coal and oil, and also solar and nuclear and geothermal, and allowing all these energy sources to really compete in an open marketplace. And how, because consumer preferences are changing, and because of various issues around divestment and all these things, this will actually lead to a cleaner future for America if we allow the free market to work.
That's very cool. I think that if we took out the kind of duopoly that makes us like pit each other against each other, or just the politics out of it, even as you said, like the libertarian like policy, like, oh, hey, we don't want the government involved, we don't see a solution to this, so we're just going to stay away from it. I think most people would be able to admit that they care about, at the very least, their backyard, or like their city, or maybe their state, or maybe that one park. Unfortunately, they're national right now, but that one park they went to that they thought was beautiful. But I can see some people saying, hey, all I've heard is that it's solar and wind and all these fancy new green stuff that's been subsidized, so it doesn't look like that would work. What would you say to them, and what would you say are the best solutions?
Yeah, I was right there with them for a while. I thought I had a very bad stigma about environmentalism. I thought environmentalists were just a bunch of tree huggers, really, a bunch of tree hugging socialists, to use Oklahoman talk. But then I realized there are actual issues. So I would say, hey, look at the data, look at the real evidence piling up about global warming, man-made global warming particularly, about pollution, about deforestation, and the negative effects it has on everybody, and the ways in which the government is using its force and using its connection with special interest groups to make the world dirtier and make the world less clean. That you can actually be a conservative or a libertarian and be an environmentalist, because libertarian economic policies, conservative economic policies, end up leading you to a much cleaner world. And the way you can go about doing that, you can get rid of these huge subsidies that we're pouring into coal, which is still failing, or these subsidies that we're putting into oil and gasoline. It's ridiculous how we're artificially deflating the price, lowering the price of oil when it costs us so much to do it. It costs us so much to do it, and it's also like not necessarily in our national interest to be so reliant on oil. We don't want another 1971 happening. We have the ability here to be more energy independent, and all it would take would be getting rid of a lot of these subsidies, getting rid of a lot of these artificial government propped up monopolies, deregulating nuclear energy would be great. These are libertarian policies. You don't have to shy away from environmental issues in order to be a libertarian or a conservative. We have the higher ground on this issue if you would just take it.
Well, there's a great, the old great adage out there that obviously good ideas don't require force, and the idea that the government's doing anything out there to push one energy over the other is pretty asinine. Also, considering that they are also the world's largest polluter. I should say the U.S.'s largest polluter, not the world's largest polluter, but definitely the U.S.'s largest polluter is the U.S. government. And kind of circling back again, one of the great things about this movement, we used the word rigidity earlier. Something that we ask here on the Rebellion a lot of times too is to also highlight the open-mindedness of people who are in the liberty movement, and that is, have you had your mind changed in the recent past, or what is the latest issue you may have had your mind changed on?
The latest issue I may have had my mind changed on. So I've had my mind changed on a lot of things over the years. About the environment was a big one. Recently, man, I really sound like a lefty on this podcast right now. I'm talking about the environment, and I'm talking about loving each other, and criminal justice reform, and I'm about to talk about immigration.
Oh, let's hear it.
So immigration is definitely the most recent place where I've had my mind significantly changed.
Where were you before?
I've always wanted to figure out, are there ways to decrease government involvement in these sorts of things? But I never really was so committed to changing the narrative on immigration as I am now. Because, immigration, I had this whole 25 tweet thread on my Twitter just about immigration and how the policies that are being espoused by the current administration and by a lot of the Republicans today are actually rather unconservative proposals. And so I was taking all of these various conservative values, like family values. That's something that a lot of conservatives hold, or like free market principles, or like traditional American constitutional values, these different things. And I was saying, okay, if we take this value as what we are driving after in the conservative movement and in the libertarian movement, or whatever, in the right of center community, wouldn't that lead us to hold a wildly different viewpoint, a viewpoint on immigration that reflects more of the relaxed policies of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Like, if you listen to Ronald Reagan and how his last speech in office was about how awesome immigration is and how we need more of it, or when he was in his the debate alongside George H.W. Bush talking about how he actually used the phrase "open the border both ways," and then to see us get into where we are, our current territory with Trump and them, advocating for more regulation on the economy at the border, advocating for not allowing firms, workers, and consumers to freely interact across border lines, or getting further involved in the lives of American citizens. People don't realize how often Border Patrol actually gets involved in the lives of American citizens and violates the Fourth Amendment of everybody, including non-citizens. There are ways to reform the system that maintains a large degree of security, but that nevertheless reflects that as America, we are, I know this is a cringy phrase, but we are a nation of immigrants. And immigration is very much a fundamental part of who we are, and it helps our economy so much. It helps the economy of the world so much as well, but especially American consumers. There's too much of a stigma about it, and so really I've been rather passionate lately about talking with conservatives about immigration and seeing, would you be willing to allow for a more relaxed process that streamlines the system, that just makes sure, are you a violent criminal? Do you have a deadly contagious disease? Is that kid that you're bringing across your kid, or are you actually like kidnapping them and trafficking them in and smuggling them in? If you're good on all of those counts, why not come into the country and work and pay taxes?
Yeah, I actually...
in fact, because we have such a difficult legal immigration process, we're inviting so much illegal immigration. It's the same argument they make with guns. They said, oh, well, criminals will just use them anyway. And then I say the same thing about immigration, and they're like, you're a crazy lefty. And I'm like, or I'm reasoning.
No, that's really cool. I actually followed your Twitter rant. I didn't know it was 25 of them. I thought I read like 4 or 5 of them. My favorite one was the one where you say, if conservatives are focused on being tough on crime and limiting the power of cartels and gangs on the border, they should realize that the illegal status of many immigrants lowers their opportunity costs of committing other more dangerous illegal activities. Not to mention that the war on drugs gives the cartels a monopoly on the black market and encourages further illegal activity itself. Many immigration problems might be solved or alleviated by ending the war on drugs, but that's another thread for another day. And that might be the number one thing that I talk about when I talk about illegal immigration, is that what they're the talking points on the right and left are almost futile. And if they stop the war on drugs and the welfare state, those two things, we might not have a problem to substantially talk about anymore, or it would be so much smaller that it wouldn't do what it does within the duopoly as it does today.
Yeah, this is the same thing that happens with healthcare. It's the same thing that's been happening with education. Same thing that's been happening with all sorts of these things, where the government intervenes in people's personal lives and the government intervenes in the marketplace, and it creates a new problem. And then they automatically forget about the program or the policy that created the problem in the first place. And then people on the right and the left both clamor for more government to solve the problem that was created by the government.
I couldn't agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I don't know how much, reverence for the Constitution you have, but you had mentioned, trying to win over both, liberals and conservatives on this. And I was wondering if I might be able to maybe help you, especially on the conservative side, because a lot of times people who consider themselves, quote unquote, conservative or Republicans out there will oftentimes default to the Constitution if you can provide them with a path and understanding and quote it. And so,
at the very least, you can shame them into just kind of being quiet after you've quoted the Constitution.
Exactly right. And so,
and shaming them might not be the best thing.
Yeah.
Encouraging them might be a better way to phrase that.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, Dylan, but I've really poured myself into the Constitution for quite some time. And one of the greatest arguments that can be made for the immigration that we would like to see, or at least moving us much closer to the immigration policies we see in this country, is very easy to explain to not only our audience here right now, but for you to take to anybody you might have the opportunity to discuss these matters with. And per Article 1, Section 8, Clause 4 of the Constitution, the federal government was only delegated the authority to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. And for everybody out there, the naturalization process is not immigration. Immigration, per the Constitution, isn't mentioned once. It's left to the states for that intrinsic purpose. Is if a state needs workers, they wanted states to be able to make those decisions on their own. The problem came with when people wanted to vote and receive the benefits, which is obviously a legal term, of being an actual citizen. So you couldn't have one state, taking in a whole bunch of immigrants and then naturalizing them without the standards with all the other states, in that way, inflating their numbers so that when it did come time to take the census and put forth representatives and take votes that would affect not only their state but the entire country, those states would have an advantage at the polling booth. So to return that power of immigration to the states and go back constitutionally to naturalization as a uniform rule across the United States is a very simple way to start bringing people to that understanding.
Yeah, there are a couple points I'd like to talk about there.
Sure.
One of those you said it should be down to the state, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, when people will bring up arguments oftentimes about, they're taking our jobs. Well, then I might ask them, well, why then are you not concerned about Texans taking Oklahoman jobs, or about Oklahoma City residents taking Tulsan jobs? Why is it or about Canadians who also to very high degrees overstay their visas? Why is the only line, this is going to be the most lefty thing I say on this podcast, why is the only line where you care about whether or not they take your jobs the line that separates all the white people from all the brown people?
Especially since the jobs that to a large degree are taken are jobs that maybe you shouldn't be that worried about somebody taking from you. Like if you're worried about somebody taking, I don't know, not grape picking, whatever, like picking grapes, I guess that's people do that, or do machines do that? I don't even know. But picking legumes or whatever. Somebody who maybe doesn't speak the language and doesn't have any higher skills can do that. Maybe you shouldn't advertise that you're that worried about that.
Well, I'm going to up the ante as often I do here. And I will tell you that if you're out there and you hear this, if you're competing with somebody who has marched thousands, if hundreds or thousands of miles to be here in the United States to work, they are probably not as well educated, even given the horrific government indoctrination system that we have here in the United States. Their English is not their first language. A lot of them don't have shoes. I mean, they don't have, the old term, a pot to piss in a lot of times when they come to this country. So as an American citizen, if you squandered the opportunity to even better yourself in the government indoctrination centers, to where now you are somewhat on a level playing field with these people who migrate here and want to work, and let's be honest, like 90+% of them just want to come here and earn some money and have better economic status and opportunity than where they did, where we, a lot of times through our bureaucracies, picking some winners and losers and cartels and everything else down south have destroyed not only those countries but some of their communities. So if that's the person you are and that's the person you're competing with, I don't have. I'm not gonna cry for you. I'm not gonna feel real bad for you. You made some really terrible decisions if those are the people you're on par with. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in towards those people. I mean that you're a flat out loser.
So I get what you're saying. I don't want to be unempathetic if that is actually the case. But the thing is, I don't think that's the case. I think it's people who aren't putting two and two together. I think a lot of them know it. And even if you are in a place where there is competition, not acknowledging that, hey, you speak the English language, you have more opportunity because, well, the standard of living in America is much higher than the standard of living in Mexico. Okay, the average American, like everybody in America has cell phones. At this point, because of technology, probably tons of people in Mexico have cell phones too. But you have more opportunity on a net-like basis. Not acknowledging that and not acknowledging that puts you ahead of the game already.
Well, just growing up in a community and having those long-lasting ties with people, over the years, those people don't have those ties, for God's sakes. I mean, when you move somewhere new, you're establishing a new social network. There might be one or two people that can help, but I mean, for the most part, the people that that can help them are also migrants, for God's sakes. It's not like they've got this long-standing reputation, as a lot of the American families in those regions do.
In a few instances, they kind of do, because you're like, if you go to Home Depot and you need some good workers, they're there.
Why so racist, thanks?
Well, my first name is Fernando, so I'm allowed to say that.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, there's very few people in the world population whose first language is Portuguese. That's for sure.
But I really like your, even though you've made a joke about it a few times, Dylan. I like that your liberal or your leftist tendencies. What the duopoly has kind of painted it so that if we do care about certain talking points, that's the first thing that our brain goes to, but it actually shouldn't. And I think that your 25 tweets, which people should absolutely go see, you can follow Dylan at th_ND_R. I'll link that in the show notes. I think that actually paints a awesome picture of, hey, actually this talking point and conservative or libertarian or smaller government or free market principles actually go together if you push apart the duopoly kind of theater that has been painted.
Yeah. If you are a very, very consistent conservative or libertarian-minded person, that will lead you to stop caring about some of these particular cultural talking points that get everybody else so outraged, or not stop caring about it necessarily, but you start looking at it in a different light, and you start saying it's all right to have a different opinion on this, because I'm not looking to stay consistent with a particular emotion. I'm not looking to stay consistent with a particular figurehead. I'm looking to stay consistent to a philosophy that preaches individual liberty, free markets, peaceful foreign policy, fiscal responsibility, promoting the Constitution of the United States, and overall decreasing the size, scope, and power of government. And that leads you to, or that at least has led me to say, well, then the most conservative position on the environment and on immigration might actually be a little bit different than what I think are the liberal positions that are being held by the Trump administration.
Ooh, that's a nice attack. I like it. So my cynical side can't help but be like, okay, Dylan, but have you seen how people just drone around in politics? One figurehead says something and they just all repeat it, even if the other figurehead from the other side said the same thing just a few years ago. Where do you get your optimism that I think is not only warranted but needed? And sometimes you need to be able to bridge from one state to another state, just because just being very cynical like takes away from motivation and so forth. How are you so optimistic?
Well, that is a really good point. I just brought up this one quote going back to the immigration debate. I'm sorry about that, but going back to the immigration thing, we were talking about the Constitution. Alex Norasta dug up this one great quote. He's the immigration guy from Cato. He's awesome. This quote by James Madison from the Report of 1800 says, "If aliens had no right under the Constitution, they might not only be banished, but even capitally punished, without a jury or the other incidents to a fair trial. But so far has a contrary principle been carried in every part of the United States that, except on charges of treason, an alien has, besides all the common privileges, the special one of being tried by a jury, of which one half may be also aliens." That was him talking about the fact that illegal immigrants have the constitutional right to a trial and can't just be deported at whim, and that they have a lot of the same rights as American citizens, according to the person who wrote the Constitution. So
I'm impressed, man. I'll tell you right now, there's not something I hear new every day, and I don't know that I've ever heard that one on Madison before. I don't think I knew that Madison had ever spoke the words that of a jury of their peers, half of them could be aliens as well. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
It flies in the face of common knowledge these days, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's really easy to hold a lot of these positions. This isn't something that I'm ever going to shame somebody for holding, because a lot of these positions at face value make a lot of sense, and a lot of more principled, more consistent positions, it takes a little bit to, digest it and then, have an opinion, change your opinion to that. And there's often social pressures, but as I said, I am very optimistic. Leads us right back in. I am pretty optimistic about the future of the liberty movement. Because of what Young Americans for Liberty is doing with Operation Win at the Door, how they're starting from the ground up, and they are, they're trying to elect liberty candidates, people who, they just want to see people allowed to be themselves and live their own lives. They're electing them at the more local levels so that eventually we can create a bench. By 2022, they want 250 state legislators around the country. And eventually that will lead up to people getting on the national stage, the next Ron Paul, the next Justin Amash, the next Thomas Massey. So I'm very optimistic for that reason, but I'm also very optimistic just because I'm generally an optimistic guy. I have a lot of faith in the human spirit. I have a lot of faith in my fellow human beings. I know the way they treat other people. I know that people are more rational and less gullible than the uppity politicians often give them credit for. I know that these people, you can actually have conversations with other human beings. That's something that can happen. But there aren't a whole lot of people in the current duopoly who have that faith in the average human being to understand new concepts and to live their own life and make decisions for themselves. But I've seen people make very difficult decisions with a lot of intelligence, very wisely, because they know their own situation better than somebody all the way over in Oklahoma City or all the way over in Washington, D.C. So I have a lot of faith in people.
So that might be what I was most impressed about, and it's because we're in Memphis in this hotel where YALCON is happening with 300 or 400 people, and there's a lot of people who could repeat what the three of us can repeat about liberty and free markets and individual rights, and even what we should be happy about and optimistic about and so forth. But before I get into that, the term uppity politicians, I'm going to be using that. I think it's great. But your focus on the human spirit and just like it oozes out of you kind of is going to make you an awesome politician. And politician sounds like a bad word.
Yeah.
But it's just statesman, sure. But being involved in politics is even kind of dirty. But being able to go into this area and have that spirit, I think will lead you very well. And if you're comfortable talking about it, I think that it kind of it grew on you with the story you told me about giving fist bumps to people.
Oh, I was gonna say I was hoping we were gonna get to this.
And I just like
Yes.
I guess just tell people the story, because you told me this story, and after we talked for maybe like 10 minutes, and it made me understand, oh, this is why this, again, kid, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way.
Yeah.
This is why this kid is so like just optimistic, and you can feel he just wants to help people.
Yeah. So all throughout high school, I walked in and I gave fist bumps to a lot of people because, well, for a few reasons. One, I just feel obligated to, by God, to love God and love people. I feel obligated, but not just that. It's like I want to treat people the way that I want to be treated. And if you see somebody for half a second, you want to make that a good half of a second for them, because you don't know if they're going to have another good half of a second in their day. So if I'm just walking up to somebody and I don't know who they are, whatever it is, but I do know they're my fellow human being. In fact, it's because I don't know their circumstances that I want to go up there. I want to give them a fist bump. I want to say, "Hey, how you doing?" Talk to them by their first name. Make a real effort to know who they are as a person and make their day just a little bit better. And it's really, really important to do that sort of thing, especially today with mental health crises and a crisis of suicide among millennials and Gen Zers, not to mention war veterans, but that's a different conversation. But just treating people kindly is so underrated, and it changes so much. I did it for 4 years, all throughout high school, and like some of the stories I would hear coming back, some of the people saying like, I needed that fist bump to get through my day. Or like every day, I never thought I was all that great. I never thought this, I never thought that, but I knew that there would always be that one person coming up, ready to recognize who I am as a person, and ready to talk with me with a smile and a fist bump. That is something that can change somebody's life. It can change a community, and it's really easy to do. It's not something about me. It's not something about any individual person. What it is about just the very, very easy thing that if you're going to walk by a person, why not also say hi? Why not also treat them like a human being instead of like a background character? Like as if you're the main character, as if I'm the main character. I get a big head all the time, but this whole fist bump thing has really sort of made me more humble, and it's made me realize that, wow, there are a lot of incredible people around me, and I'm so grateful for the friends that have come alongside me. And so I tried to bring it into college. Didn't really work out the first year because, well, it's a whole college, But so now we're trying to make it into a club. This club is going to be called TU Plus standing for positivity and inclusion. So, plus being positive, like a sign of positivity, but also plus as in like, oh, you're sitting beside yourself at the lunch table. Okay, you're sitting alone plus me. Or we're all hanging out over here. Well, we're hanging out over here plus you. You're included as well. So TU Plus is all about spreading positivity and inclusion through random acts of kindness, like fist bumps, like high fives, like sitting by people at the lunch table, like handing out candy during test days, during finals days, and that sort of thing. Like saying their name and waving hi and saying, hey, how are you doing today? Having a conversation with people, learning the people's names and who they are, and treating them as you want to be treated. So it's very proactive, but it's also very reactive. It has a reactive function as well, because we're all going to be wearing green bracelets, green wristbands, so that people out in the community, if they need help, because there's such a stigma about talking with a therapist or about talking with a pastor or about talking with somebody else like sort of in authority, this gives them an opportunity to come and talk to somebody their own size, sort of, to talk to somebody, one of their own peers, about what their issues are and how their day is going, or even just to talk with somebody else. Like, there are a lot of times that I or the people that I talk to, after a long day of homework, we're just really like sort of secluded and by ourselves, and like, I just want to talk to another person. This gives people that outlet to talk to somebody else and to have a conversation with somebody who really cares about them. So this is going to get kicked off this semester, and I have very lofty goals for this organization. I want it to stay on TU I want this to be a mainstay, and I want this to spread to other college campuses very quickly, and it's going to happen.
That's really cool, Dylan. I appreciate you telling that story. It really, I can be kind of sappy and like lefty as well. That might be like the extreme. But I think marrying that with like the philosophical, like objective policy stuff and putting those two together, I think it might be a little hard in pretty conservative Oklahoma. But if somebody's going to do that, I have a lot of optimism in you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I don't think that's too hard in Oklahoma, because here's the thing. People really don't care too much about like the very, very big issues. When you talk with people about what can I do for you as a representative, what they care about is they care about the roads. They care about, I know, more roads. Okay, whatever. But they care about the roads. They care about their schools. They care about making sure they have a job opportunity. And that's something that we all can do. And we can have these debates about immigration or other things, but I can make them the promise that, hey, I am going to go to Washington. I'm going to stand up for you. I'm going to always get input from you about these issues. And I'm going to try to do whatever I can to get the government out of your life so you can be treated like an individual and not like a cog in a machine. That's something that I think can spread across a wide. And being the buckle of the Bible Belt, a lot of people in Oklahoma care deeply about other people. That's why the TU Plus group chat, despite the fact that we've never had a recruitment event, it already has 54 people in the chat, at least. And it's only going to grow from there. We're probably going to hit hundreds because people really care about other people. We are a very Christian state. And you go to any of these churches and they're like, anybody can come into their church, and especially with my church, anybody can come in and they'll be accepted regardless of their past. It's a very, very great environment to talk about issues of freedom and to talk about issues of loving your neighbor. Well,
I should have expected that you would be much more optimistic than me, and you do know Oklahoma better, so that's pretty awesome. Thanks again for telling that story.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, here's the thing. We have a state senator down here. His name's Nathan Dahm. He's one of the members of the Hazlitt Policy Coalition that Young Americans for Liberty has set up.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that this sort of thing can work, and I really think this sort of thing can work in the Sand Springs area and in the Tulsa area, where it's very purple, actually. The Sand Springs and Tulsa area, Sand Springs has a state, it's their state senator that they elected is a Democrat. Tulsa is almost 50-50 purple. It's a very vibrant, diverse, artsy community, but it's also a community where business is thriving, and a lot of people are coming to Tulsa for jobs, and there are a lot of churches in the area. This is a place where somebody can come in and challenge the duopoly and tell people I really care about who you are as an individual, and I don't want the Republican Party or the Democrat Party to tell you otherwise. I'm going to come into this area and really talk with you as a person and allow you to make this the community you want it to be.
Dylan, I think it's awesome, and I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us. I'd like, once you decide to step out into this really crazy world that is politics, I'd like to have you back on the show, and I'd like to kind of juxtapose your positions now against your positions going into that race. I imagine because they are rigid and steadfast and built on the bedrock of peace and liberty and free markets, I imagine you're going to be the same guy, just with more experience under your belt, more stories under your belt to tell us then. We can't tell you how much we appreciate your time today and your positivity in this world. It is sorely needed, so keep it up, man. And Banks, you got anything on your side?
No, I'll make sure to link, as I said, your Twitter on here if people want to follow you. I think that there's a lot of value in that. I really enjoyed those tweets, as I said. And if you ever have anything you need from us, we would love to promote anything of yours.
That'd be great. Hey, I have a little bit of something that I need to talk about as a Golden Hurricane from the University.
Oh, yes, you did ask if you could talk about that. Go ahead.
Yes.
It's a podcast. We're fine.
This has been something that has been very, very important to a lot of people in the area, students, professors, and alumni in the area, is the University of Tulsa, 1 week before finals, announced the True Commitment Initiative. The True Commitment Initiative got rid of basically 40% of its programs, including geosciences, math, all sorts of grad programs, and getting rid of a lot of its liberal arts and humanities programs, getting rid to a large degree with the languages and with the honors program, which deals with things that the libertarian audience of this podcast will really care about. We deal with classical liberalism. We deal with people like John Locke and John Stuart Mill and what liberty means and why our foundations of small government, how our Constitution and Declaration came about. This program, all these programs are getting eliminated from the university without any sense of transparency, faculty representation, honesty about the data, honesty about their communications with the Higher Learning Commission. They actually caught them out on a lie. They've caught them out on lies that contradict each other. It's a real whole mess, and it's stripping away the sense of what a university is at the university. So we've been doing all sorts of protests. There's a link on my Twitter and on my Instagram. My Instagram is sort of like my Twitter, but with dots instead of underscores. You can click the link on either one of those bios, and that will take you to a change.org petition where you can read more about what has been happening with the True Commitment Initiative, why people, all sides of the political spectrum, all sides of the cultural spectrum, anywhere you are, should be concerned about what's going on in the University of Tulsa and really all around the country with higher education, and gives you an opportunity to sign it and tell the University of Tulsa administration that, hey, we need to go through this process again, this time with real faculty involvement and with the raw data being released for everybody to see and talk about.
Very cool. I will link that as well. Looks like there's about 7,580 signatures so far. And if you guys go there, it looks like there's a whole explanation on top of what Dylan just told us. So I'll make sure to link that so that our listeners go and check it out.
Yeah. Thank you very much, man. This has been great. Man, I didn't even get to tell them the story about how I became Thunder, but I think that'll probably be something for next time.
Awesome. And that gives us a great reason for next time. But yeah, Dylan, thanks again. And thanks for being such an awesome cheerleader for liberty.
God bless, buddy.
Cheerleader for liberty. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gents, that was Dylan Thunderhart. Man, I'll tell you, Banks.
It's Dylan Thunder
Dylan T. Hart, which is...
But it also sounds like Thunderheart, which is funny.
I'm I'm looking forward to having him back in the future. The guy's going to do some amazing things. I can't help but, be extreme. I don't want to say it's not a jealous feeling. It's one of those things where you look at somebody and know somebody and see their heart and their positivity and know that they're just going to do amazing things. I think Dylan's that guy.
Oh, I can tell, and I can't help as the older person. Just listening to him try to encourage him. And
Sure.
I'm sure he needs it too. But in sometimes I'm like, yeah, he's like an Ender bunny. He's always going to be like he's so optimistic.
Yeah.
And really his intention, as I said, like oozes out of him. It's unbelievable.
So when we were standing around, I don't know if we were we were just wrapping up dinner or whatever it was at the point when I got to speak with him. But that was one of the first things that we talked about was his fist on story. And when he was telling me about it, and he kind of gave very much the same story, and then the objectiveness and the really the reason behind why we should be doing things like that. He struck this chord within me. We were over in the Joff on Fob Duke Forward Operating Base. This was my second tour, and I was over there for a year. Usually a deployment for a Marine Expeditionary Unit is about 6 months. We never saw the boats that dropped us off again. We just kind of left there, and there was kind of a hole, I guess, in the schedule. And so we got to stick around. And so having been part of Force Reconnaissance, a lot of times you're looked at a little bit differently. Clothing, equipment, vehicles, you name it. There's just something different. Some people say, yeah, it's the funding and the money. But a lot of the guys that I rolled around with were also extremely positive, and there are insignia like a parachute wings, like what you'll see over there on the paddle. A lot of guys that have been to assault dive school will have also a bubble on top of those wings, so what they call is dual cool kind of thing. And so not a lot of guys have
double
that.
plus cool.
Yeah, that's right. Not a lot of guys had that, and so we had this guy in my team who's just recently retired. His name was Mo, and Mo was one of those guys. It still is one of those guys. It's just super, super positive. You couldn't help but like the guy. And we'd go out and do kind of hippy dippy things like play ultimate frisbee together, and great exercise out there in the heat. With very little equipment, you can have a hell of a good time and get a great workout, and build some camaraderie amongst Marines and different platoons and things like that. And so more than once, and Mo and I would walk back and forth to dinner or go lift weights or whatever it was. I mean, you always kind of traveled in packs a lot of times, and when you walk, I mean, a lot of times you're walking at least half to 3/4 of a mile to get food, and or go to kind of the main side of the base, and along the way you pass Marines and sailors, and sometimes you'd pass the occasional guy who was an airman, or if you were on a different type of base, like an Army base, you'd pass a soldier. And so Mo and I started going around and high-fiving guys. If we wouldn't see, if the rank was a little too high, like, colonels and up, even sometimes lieutenant colonels, in the Marine Corps, a lot of times, the rank can put people off. Like, they think they're a little more important than they are, right?
I've heard that from almost every military or veteran person I've
But
ever
I'll
met.
tell you, without fail, if it was a gunnery sergeant, sometimes even a master sergeant, or a warrant officer, but especially the guys, if you were looking at the collar and you didn't see a whole lot of black, a whole lot of rank, man, I tell you what, it was one of the highlights of my day to be able to go up to those guys, as these guys that a lot of times are emulated and looked up to be able to give them a high five. I mean, they're, just rolling in out of the field somewhere. They're dirty. They're nasty. Hell, their buddies could have been killed, recently, or somebody was injured, they lost somebody real close to them, stuff back home that they have no earthly idea about what's going on. They have no control over the situations they're still finding out about overseas. That little bit of sunshine in their life, I can't tell you how many times it worked out great. I mean, there were times when it didn't work out so great, and then Mo and I would have a laugh, and then we would even get reprimanded once in a while, but it was totally worth it, man. It was totally worth it to be able to take that moment out of our life and just for a sheer second bring some joy to somebody else, man.
It sounds like you got at least as much out of it as other people, but I like what Dylan said. He was talking about, especially in like this time of like mental illness and like suicide and so forth. Can you imagine, like I can imagine easily, I've never been suicidal or something like that, but I can imagine if somebody's having a horrible day and is having bad thoughts, and a stranger just randomly like high fives you and like acknowledges you, like how that can change your day. Even if it must take a pretty horrible like process to decide at one point to commit suicide. So even if you're interrupting like that process, we're probably all in that process to some degree. Hopefully everybody's at the very, very start where you just have like a bad thought here and there, depressed or whatever. But if everybody keeps on doing that, we can just interrupt the process for everybody. Just all the time. And
how weird in this day and age, like, somebody, complete stranger in public, walks by, smiles at you, high fives you. The first thing that goes through a lot of people's minds, and I'd be lying if I wasn't.
I know what you're gonna say.
It was like, what the hell is wrong with that person?
I thought you were gonna say, is he high?
Well, yeah. I mean, no, that was not. That was actually not the first thing I was gonna say. But with one of the that thing, and as a society where we've just become so I don't know, sometimes so bleak, to be able to have that first thought is, all right, what's this guy up to, instead of, oh cool, man, like this guy's he's not up to anything. He's up to spreading goodwill and joy and things like that. Like that's a neat thing to do. And so, like I haven't done it in a while, and maybe it's one of those things that you try to bring back in this audience, and you try to lift somebody up. I don't care if it's coworkers or people that you meet out on the street or sidewalks. We're all just people. Age is probably about the most different thing that we've got in terms of, who you are in this day and age, man.
And it ain't that different.
And a high five, man, that's universal, brother. That's high five. And you know what? Who cares if somebody doesn't give you a high five back, or if they think you're weird? Probably don't know them anyway. They're probably never going to see him again. And here's the other thing is, Banks, I'll tell you, after a while with, some of the guys that may have been older, that may have had a little more rank, even some of the colonels and lieutenant colonels and things like that, they would stop you and they'd ask you, like, what are you doing? Fraternization's a real thing, right? Like, you don't fraternize with people who are too high above you, enlisted versus officers, males versus females, things like that. And even after a while, we had those guys going, that's a pretty cool thing you're doing.
I thought fraternization was like the good part about life, but I know what you're saying.
You are right. You are right. But I think that's probably, if you got nothing else, I think that's probably a good place to wrap this whole thing up.
That is it for the show. If you have any comments, questions, ideas for a new guest, you can send it to us at info@rebellionpod.com. If you find value in the show, you can support us on Patreon. It is patreon.com/rebellionpod. You'll become a patron. You'll receive every 3 or 4 months, you'll receive some of our awesomely cool stickers. We made a meme the other day, and apparently people want that to be a sticker too. So now there's extra stickers.
Banks is coming up with a great disclaimer for it. The stop sign meme.
If you haven't seen it, go look at it.
Yeah,
apparently
go check out our Facebook page. Go check out Twitter. You can find me and Banks specifically at Shane T. Hazel and F. Banks Wise across all the platforms. What are we forgetting? If you want to become patron, you've already done that as well. No? Yes?
Reviews.
Oh, reviews. Yes. You know what? We actually got one extra review. We're up to 93.
Woo!
It wasn't a written review, but it was definitely a 5-star ranking. So thank you.
That means the world to us. We'd like to get to 100 soon, but we do value everybody who's taking the time to do that. It's not that hard. You go on your Apple Podcast app on your phone, or even if you have a PC, you can go to iTunes on your computer, and you just find our little podcast. Doop, it's 5 stars.
You can leave a review there. You can leave a review on Facebook. For everybody that's done it, thank you guys so much. And we can't thank you guys enough for everything you do for us, for making us a part of your lives. We love you to death, and we love doing this with you guys. Changing culture is not an easy thing, but I'll tell you, episode by episode, and fist bump by fist bump, and high five by high five, I think we've got a really, really good chance to do just that. But this has been The Rebellion, your place for peace, liberty, and free markets.
We need you. We love you. Go fist bump people.
Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.